July 2nd meeting of the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust will consider to be in order. And we have a special thing at the first of the agenda. We have a presentation by the American Water Works Association. So if you'd introduce our guest.
Mr. Chairman, with us this afternoon is Paula McElwain. She's the Deputy Executive Director of the American Water Works Association, and she brings us a trophy. Paula?
Thank you, Marcia. And it's great for me to be here. I'm actually from Oklahoma City, but I come from Denver, Colorado, and we bring you our greetings from Denver, Colorado. But I am here for a special reason. As most of you know, Oklahoma City participated in the American Water Works Taste Test Championship that we just held in Denver last month. And in that contest, we had 22 organizations or water departments that submitted taste tests. And they submitted their samples. We had a distinguished panel of judges. And Oklahoma City, I'm thrilled to announce, beat out Denton, Texas, Emporia, Denver, Colorado, Anchorage, Alaska, Puerto Rico to win this prestigious award. And American Water Works developed this award years ago because we thought it would be a fun and great way to show how seriously we take safe drinking water. But we can also have fun with it, even though day to day we take it seriously, no matter what position people hold in their jobs. It's all part of providing safe water. So we're very pleased, and I'm going to ask my trusty assistant and also husband to show the trophy and ask Marcia or someone to come, Pete, to come down and take this beautiful trophy off of our hands so it's not rattling around in the back of our car. Wow. Isn't that nice?
I understand it's traveling.
It's a traveling, and that is part of the deal. That you have to come to Boston next year, which is where we're going to hold the next taste test and defend your title. So congratulations to you, Marcia.
Well, that's almost Stanley Cup-esque.
I know. So, we are from Denver,
Staff proposes a toast. We have cups of water. The water came from the Draper Water Treatment Plant. Whiskeys for drinking, waters for fighting over.
So that's what won.
What a speech. Maybe. To all employees. To the trustees, to the AWWA for its leadership in our technical program, and to our customers. Clink glasses.
Well, on behalf of those of us that are on the trust, I would like to express our appreciation for all the hard work that's done by you folks out there and the people that run the system. It's just always been a real pleasure and an honor for me to chair this organization, knowing how many really hard-working, dedicated people we have that do the work. And I see a lot of your faces out there, and I appreciate it. And I'm sure all the rest of us up here do, too.
So, the water plant superintendents are here. Water quality superintendent Monty Hannon's here, and our laboratory manager.
Have them stand.
Yeah.
Have them sit
Stand up, guys. Thank you.
The first item on the regular part of the agenda is the approval of the meetings from the June 18th meeting. So moved. Second. Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. Are there comments or questions? Hearing none, voting please. Minutes are approved. Next item is item 4. It's a consent docket. Number of individual items on the consent docket.
Move the consent docket subject to individual consideration.
Have a second? We have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Are there matters to be considered individually?
I have a question. It's not on this agenda, it's related to one of the projects. So, Lake Havner Water Treatment Plant, is that ever going to be finished?
It will. It will not be finished in time for this summer's, in time for this summer's peak demand, but it will be finished later this fall. There's a change order on your agenda today that talks about it being 944 days in total length. So it has been a very long project. We see progress in the amount of concrete that's in place, some of the new water treatment process, filter processes, the filter beds are being filled. Doug Holmes is plant superintendent, and they've been very busy trying to keep up with the complexities of constructing a plant while it's still running.
My constituents don't have that sensitivity to think about it. They're concerned it looks like a war zone.
It does.
At the time that when the project's completed, does water department have plans to go in there and restore it? Because it was a fairly attractive facility.
We are. We're discussing right at this minute how to meet water conservation goals and lay new sod. So there is sod coming soon in parts of the plant. We know that dust will become an issue later this summer if we don't get sod down, and so we're working through how to do that.
Thank you very much, Marcia.
Further comments or questions on the consent docket? Hearing none, voting please. Consent docket's approved. Next item is a concurrence docket. 3 matters.
Move the item subject to individual consideration.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the concurrence docket. Are there matters to be discussed separately? Hearing none, voting please. Concurrence docket's approved. Item 6, the number of items for individual consideration. The first one is a resolution authorizing the general manager to prepare a request for proposals for the use of 7632 Southwest 149th for commercial purposes.
Give us a little bit of a...
Sure. This is property that was recently vacated. It's a 230-acre tract. We're interested in potentially splitting out the commercial facility, which is a nice sized, open, heated and cooled room with a large patio and great parking spaces. We desire something of relatively rural activity and are currently keeping the area busy around a core, but want something permanent in there that will be a good lessee as we've had in the recent past.
Move the item.
I have a motion and a second. I have a question. Do we plan on leasing the surrounding 220 acres immediately, or we're going to wait till this RFP comes back?
I'm interested in getting feedback about what our best option is. Mm-hmm. So we will speed up the process to figure out how to do it as quickly as possible and get some advice quickly. We're about a month into the vacancy today, so working on that.
Okay.
We'll work with our lawyer and get moving.
Well, we need to make the best decision. It's just looking back on it, there's a lot of things we could have done better on that proposal, and one of them is we didn't really need to lease 240 acres for a gun range to start out with. Anyway, we have a motion and a second to approve item 6A. Voting, please. Item's approved. Item 6B is a resolution authorizing the general manager to enter a complaint and consent order with the EPA. Confess to it. Civil penalty of $65,800. How many dead fish is that?
Well, it is about 65,000. It is not the kind of penalty, but it's embarrassing. We failed to submit an updated plan to EPA. We have one thing that we do with EPA, which is risk management planning. We failed to submit a plan to them timely. When we found it, in our audit of all of our permits, we corrected it as quickly as we could. EPA acknowledged that we corrected it. They acknowledged that we're very reliable and produce good quality water, but we made a mistake. there's no good news out of paying a penalty. What we did do, though, is report that we had made things safer in the interim. It's really important to me. We were not being difficult. Part of the reason, I should tell you, EPA also acknowledged that there were no reminders sent, which they aren't obligated to do and we shouldn't expect, and were changing the process to begin sending reminders because apparently this hit several organizations, not just ours. Again, we have a collective monitoring of all of our permit requirements and deadlines. This one is really stupid. It just wasn't on the list. That's pretty embarrassing. And we're proceeding with other risk management planning for the future. Right now.
Any further questions? Have a motion?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve item 6B. Hearing no further discussion, voting please. 6B is approved. 6C, there's an amendment that has been added with regard to 6C. It's a acceptance of a special warranty deed. I guess we first need a motion to accept the amendment to the item, or some.
Just a change in wording, and you're recommending the city accept the special warranty
Right.
deed, and then you're authorizing the payment of the claim.
Okay, one motion would do that
Sure.
without combining this, doing anything.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve item 6C with the amendment. Is there discussion? Hearing none, voting please. Item 6C is approved. Next item, executive session. Do we need executive session?
I can give you an update, but due to the time, we're going into some more negotiations next week, and I think it'd be prudent to maybe give you an update the following time. But things are progressing.
Okay. Do one 2 weeks from now, is that what you're saying? Okay. Have a motion to strike item 6D.
So moved. Second.
Have a motion to strike item 6D. Voting, please. Item 6D is stricken. Next item is items from trustees. Other comments?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I don't think my citizens would be very impressed with the fact that they got fined for using water that's the best tasting water in the country. I've gotten 3 or 4 inquiries from my citizens about getting citations for watering on the wrong day. And it was made television news last night. They talked about it. So have we continued to provide informational things to our citizens to make sure they're aware of the fact that we've got it?
We have, and as you know, across the city, people
Marcia.
didn't realize. Thank you, I'm so sorry. We are providing additional information on the upcoming water bills, and the line that tells you when your bulky waste service is scheduled. It will also remind you that we're in odd even watering, it's mandatory odd even watering limitation. We're adding inserts to the bills as well. I believe we're doing a second direct mail to all customers. We're trying to hit them on all possible levels. Tickets or citations are painful for everybody, but the fact that we get a little news about them being a problem or about them occurring is perhaps helpful for us. We've issued about 500 citations. They're just going through the process. People do have a right to appeal. But we're also working on ways to better help the people who are in the field working the citations and finding folks who are not watering at the right day to help those folks decide whether it's something they should write a ticket for or not. And we'll bring that through the city manager's office with thoughts about what kinds of discretion they should have and how we might apply that.
Because that was one of the comments. Discretion was the word the citizen used.
And that's important.
But it was his feeling that he wasn't going to get a warning ticket. He was going to get a citation.
We gave warning. Yes, that's correct. Once everything was published and we'd done direct mailers, we started giving tickets directly.
I have an unrelated question. It's sort of related. One of my citizens said, well, since Lake Hefner is full, why are we doing this? If we had no rain from now on, not now on, but for the summertime, and we continue to use water at the present rate, what would the impact be on Lake Hefner?
Lake Hefner Lake Hefner's starting out much more full than it was last year, by about 25,000 acre feet. So it may decline over the summer substantially. It reached the low, was in the 180s, 170s. It may be 5 feet higher in depth. That it will be impacting recreation, but not, we won't keep boats won't be on the ground in their
Some
stalls.
shoreline showing?
Yes.
That's good.
Any other comments from trustees? I've had a couple of inquiries from people that hold the land leases in the Draper area concerning the damage that some of them, one in particular, sustained as a result of the storms, tornado. I'm not really looked through the leases from the standpoint of whether or not they're entitled to any deferral of lease payments or something, but many of them really suffered pretty dramatically as a result of the tornado. And I'd just like somebody to look at that and see if there are things that the damage was not just to the potential for grazing and hay. That damage was physical to the property itself. I mean, it rained cars and trucks and lawnmowers and tore down fences and all kinds of stuff. So there's a lot of economic loss there. I'm not sure we have a responsibility for it, but I'd like to look and see what we think our responsibilities are.
We have been out.
If any.
Sure, happy to. We have been out and inspected property. Bulky waste will be coming through our property in the same way it's going through the rest of the city. We're on the trash collection side. We have about 200 square miles of damage area, maybe perhaps a little bit more. We're through about 120 square miles on the first pass, collecting debris. Bulky waste crews are overwhelmed by the process. It's wonderful that there are contractors available. So we're working through how many continuing crews we need over the next month. We're wrapping up the first month of collection. We have not made it to much of Ward 4 at all yet.
Well, I'm not so much concerned about we got the light end of it, except at the very edge, the very east edge, perhaps along Sunny Lane, from Sunny Lane. There's a little strip in there where,
right.
But the so out closer to Draper where I live, I mean, we had a lot of trees blown over, but nothing like. I mean, I'm more concerned about the people that have grazing leases, that we ought to just look at those and see, to see if we have responsibilities, what they are.
We will.
And we had damage in areas of the city that weren't affected by the tornado. Just the high winds broke off limbs and split trees, and so it was very widespread. Although it declined in intensity as it went north, there was no question about that. But.
Next item is item 8, General Manager's Report, Status Report on Utilities.
Mr. Chairman, I would waive and be happy to answer questions. We do have a short presentation planned by Corolla Engineers that talks about emergency power and how we're going to provide it at the Draper plant. That seemed timely given the impact that we suffered in the storm. Good morning, Tom. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, trustees. Thanks for having me. I'm Tom Crowley with Corolla Engineers, here to talk about project WT0092, which was actually split into two projects. Project A dealt with strengthening of the mechanical systems associated with the Draper Water Treatment Plant. But I'm here actually to talk about the Project B, which is specifically kind of a 50,000-foot look at permanent power generation at the Draper Water Treatment Plant. Our agenda today is we're going to provide a project background, take a look at some of the goals and objectives of the project, look at the evaluation of the power generation alternatives, provide some input on a payback analysis that we had performed with these generators operating in a peak shaving mode, and then provide you a recommended course of action. So let's look at the background. The Draper Water Treatment Plant electrical system consists of a substation located at the plant that feeds the entire plant, both the high service, low service, and the treatment trains. It consists of 2 feeds. Feed 1 comes from Sunny Lane. The power quality can be somewhat dicey on high power consumption days. It's because it's on the end of the line. We call that the Sunny Lane feed. Feed number 2, if you notice, goes down the same road, and it comes from the Reno substation. So you have 2 electrical feeds. They're entirely redundant. The transformers at the substation are not, but the feeds are. The current permanent backup facilities at the Draper Water Treatment Plant, let me illustrate. There is a demand in 2011 over the entire year. The permanent facilities consist of a power generator on the 15 MGD diesel pump. As you can see, it's insufficient to meet even wintertime demands at this point. Recent extended Draper Water Treatment Plant interruptions include the May 10, 2010 storms, in which both OG&E feeds were knocked down. We had a power outage for approximately 3 days. Some emergency rental generators were called in place, but it was about 2 weeks until we had both power lines restored by OG&E. As a result, that prompted staff to negotiate a contract with the group that provided that emergency rental generation to move forward. And then we all know what happened in May of this year. Both OG&E feeds went down again. Asset Group was on site within 24 hours. OG&E actually had the power restored within a 24-hour period. So we know that we're in an area subject to severe weather outbreaks, and with overhead lines feeding into the Draper Water Treatment Plant, we wanted to look at a permanent power generation alternative. So included in these goals and objectives was, let's look at what the future needs are at the Draper Water Treatment Plant, not just now, but 30 years from now, which is an expected life of a generation equipment. Let's look at the different types of generators that are out there and determine what might be the best fit for you and the way you might be utilizing them. We're going to analyze that based on a net present value to provide you the best option from a cost perspective and a maintenance perspective, and then conduct kind of a sample payback analysis looking at if we were to use these generators all the time during the summer as a way to aid OG&E with their power supply needs. And then we're going to provide you a recommended course of action. One of the things that we looked at was an electrical master plan. So we determined the demands that would be necessary at the Draper Water Treatment Plant based upon the production values assumed in the next 30 years based on the master planning numbers. And what we designed was a electrical system loop underground, internal to the plant, to distribute power to all of the vital equipment. And the nice thing about the loop is if that is cut at one particular point, it can provide power to the entire facility. So it provides a level of redundancy and reliability that they don't have currently with their power distribution system. It also allows us to provide one potential site for a permanent generation facility, and then also some potential sites for the rental generators to hook up at any point, at specific points within the plant. So we looked at several power generation scenarios. So in the graph in front of you, you have a demand and over the years for 2011. We looked at 100 MGD of power generation, permanent power generation, which currently provides you with complete coverage except for a few days of peak day demands. 150 MGD generation we looked at, that could provide you through 2041 demands. So we looked at several alternatives for the permanent power generation. We conducted some workshops with staff describing each type of generator and narrowed it down to basically 2 types of generation facilities. The first is a dual-fuel natural gas diesel turbine. And this is a very large unit, typically used on larger water treatment plants, larger facilities. We chose that because the amount of power generation, particularly for the 150 MGD option, looked favorable for a diesel turbine. The next would be a bi-fuel natural gas diesel engine generator set. Unlike a turbine, it's a smaller, but it's much more familiar with staff. That's type of a mobile unit that you can see here set up. That's a facility outside of Atlanta. We finally did a life cycle cost comparison between the 2 options at both the flows. Turned out the way that you would use it and your electrical demands were more favorable for the bi-fuel generator option. So as a result of the lowest capital cost and the 30-year net present value, the ability to provide either natural gas or diesel provided a good advantage to that type of generation. It was easier to operate and maintain. There are multiple units to provide some redundancy and reliability. And then staff has familiarity with this type of equipment. Turbines are a little bit more specialized and would take a little bit more specialized training. Staff is familiar with this because they've had these on site. They have it in their pump station now. So next we want to look at a payback analysis. So how you would use it. For example, the city of Kansas City uses it. They're actually in control of their generators. They're a 230 MGD facility. They're in control of their generators, and they'll call up the power company, and they'll be the ones to start up and operate. Others, the power company actually has control over the generator and the gear and would operate those. So it really depends upon the local power company. What we used in our payback analysis was publicly established rates. There's a customized rate tariff that OG&E offers, but it's subject to negotiation. So we used publicly accepted rates for our payback analysis. For example, so you take the historical electrical demands over a year. As you can see, you're using more power in the summer. Under that scenario, what you would do is you would operate, say, over a typical day in August. On the off-peak rate, you would be on OG&E power. Now, when the rate goes higher, you would turn on the generation and supply your own power during that time. And then during the off-peak, you utilize your OG&E line service. So it would be turned on and off throughout the day. We made some assumptions regarding how often they would be operated. I think we had 400 hours a year. So we determined, based on the customized rate tariff, a 30-year net present value. The project would be financed with 30-year bonds at your current interest rates. We would use the fuel adjustment rider rate, which was the publicly available data, for the purchased energy from OG&E. And we also applied OG&E paralleling costs. And what I mean by paralleling cost is the cost to OG&E to supply the gear for them to control the generators. So there you see the results. We're looking at a capital cost for 3 2,500 kilowatt generator units, bi-fuel engine generators for a 100 MGD scenario of about $10 million. The fuel and O&M costs were calculated based upon historical numbers from operating facilities. And we have a net savings per year of $244,000 if it were a 15-year cycle. Moving it out to a 30-year cycle basically would cost you $130,000 a year to purchase and operate these generators over a 30-year period, assuming the payback values that we used in our analysis. As a result of this analysis, we would recommend that you would implement the permanent generation facilities at the Draper Water Treatment Plant and begin negotiations with ONG&E on a customized rate tariff to determine more refined numbers for a payback analysis. One of the thoughts behind the recommendation is, because of the degree of storms that you have at the treatment plant, it is nice to retain the emergency generation contract with the asset group. However, having permanent facilities allow you to turn them on prior to a storm. So you would have basically a insurance policy against failure during a storm event. That concludes my presentation for today. Mr. Chairman, trustees, I'll open up for questions.
What kind of system do we have at Hefner? Or do we have one?
There's just a dual power feed.
So if this works well at Draper, you would maybe consider it at Hefner?
Yes, we looked at the Draper plant from experience, and actually we looked at the path of tornadoes, the history. So we started with Draper because we felt it had, obviously from experience, it has a higher likelihood. We don't have thoughts yet about precisely what to do at Draper, at Hefner, and we're weighing whether it can be at all practical to buy something that moves from plant to plant. These are pretty massive. I'm still struggling with that piece of the puzzle. How might we fit this into the entire system? It's intellectually interesting. It's quite a bit easier to put backup power in a wastewater treatment plant than a place where you're very likely to have power losses in extreme weather conditions that may produce extreme water uses. Not always, but there's typically some weather-related need for water for others, perhaps, if not just for our own customers. It's a presentation we're going to work through and bring you a staff recommendation. Wanted to get this out on the table given the timeliness and keep it in the forefront.
How much of this is driven by the loss of power for storms and is driven by this? We could actually save money regardless.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, what I presented up there, and let me show you that again, is actually still a payment of $130,000 a year, but that's the cost to you over a 30-year period to operate and maintain a facility in that manner.
And that, how dependent is that $130,000 on having these kind of super storms that we've had the last?
What it would be is it would actually be a different paradigm of operation. You would actually operate the generators normally, and then you would just turn them on during storm events to provide that added emergency generation.
I guess what I'm trying to get to is, obviously they'd provide redundancy and backup power if you lost power for a storm. If we never had another storm.
If you never had another storm and you wanted to operate them for peak shaving of your electrical...
But it would still save money over a 30-year cycle if you never had another storm. Is that correct?
I'm saying that you would still spend $130,000 a year, even with the fuel costs and all of the stuff that it costs to operate.
And it wouldn't save you anything?
No.
Okay.
But you've got the protection there. You've got the backup energy supply when you...
I understand that. I'm just trying to determine how much of it's based on you've got to have storms in order to make it cash flow properly.
Right. If you look at it that way, you're not saving any money. You're actually spending money over a 30-year period.
Well, is this based on storms of the frequency of the last, say, 5 or 6 years, or is it based on a 30-year cycle for storm? Or did that even factor into?
Yeah, it didn't factor in. That, because it's so nebulous, we
Right.
didn't even predict that. But the only reason we included that payback analysis is because some utilities actually realize savings. We use publicly available rates. There's no saying that the rates would be different would you enter in negotiations with OG&E at a high level.
I'm just trying to get my arms around how much
Sure,
that
I
is,
understand.
what's redundancy cost, and you've answered that.
Yeah. If you were to not, for example, not negotiate at all with OG&E, your capital cost would be a $10 million upfront to have the generators in place on an emergency standby basis, having never used them. So $10 million right now. But if you were to operate them with the OG&E rates, it would be $3.9 million over a 30-year period.
So the same logic would apply to at half-term, and
It may. Depending on the loads. Draper has a high load. I'm actually one of the highest in the metro area.
Right.
So it'd be very attractive, particularly, I don't know where OG&E is, but it might be very attractive for them to sit down with you and discuss a peak shaving option.
They have a pretty effective system in place for residential customers, where the electricity is discounted during the summer months, and it really gets expensive if you use it during the peak, so that would be there may be some room to negotiate a better deal than just the public rates.
Exactly.
Any more questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, trustees. Great water.
Any other comments from the general manager with regard to the report?
Yes, sir.
Are there citizens to be heard? No one signed up? We're adjourned. Thank you.